Captain Veltar pressed his 6 delicate hands against the smooth crystal surface of the command console. The ship around him was dying. He could feel it in the way the bioorganic walls pulsed weakly, like a heart struggling to beat. The Serenity's Echo had been his home for 12 cycles, a beautiful vessel grown from living crystal and nurtured with songs that helped its system stay healthy. Now those same walls were cracked and bleeding a thick silver fluid that pooled on the floor. The ship was in pain, and Veltar could do nothing to help it. "Captain," called out Science Officer Lymara from her station across the bridge. Her voice was soft and musical, like all of their kind. The Kitharans had never needed to shout or speak harshly. Their world had been one of gentle rains and singing flowers, where the biggest danger was getting caught in a sudden downpour. "The quantum communicator is still working. Should we send another message?" Veltar's iridescent skin shifted from its normal peaceful blue to a worried purple. Through the great viewing crystal at the front of the bridge, he could see the enemy ships approaching. They looked wrong, like tumors growing in space. The vessels were dark and twisted, made from what looked like bones and metal fused together in painful ways. They moved with a hunger that made Veltar's stomach turn. The Devourers had come from nowhere, attacking without warning or reason. They had not tried to communicate or demand anything. They simply began tearing apart everything in their path, consuming the wreckage and growing stronger. In the past few hours, Veltar had watched them destroy 3 research stations and 2 transport ships. Each time they had taken everything, the metal, the people, even the energy from the power cores, and absorbed it into their fleet. "Yes," Veltar said finally. "Send the message again. Perhaps someone will hear us." Lymara's fingers danced over her crystal interface, and the ship's communicator sent their desperate plea across the darkness between stars. The message was simple and honest, the way all Kitharan communications were. They did not know how to lie or deceive. Such concepts were foreign to them. "This is Captain Veltar of the research vessel Serenity's Echo," the message began. "We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our ship is severely damaged, and we cannot escape. The attackers they are like nothing we have ever seen. They consume everything they touch. Our weapons cannot harm them because we have no weapons. We are a peaceful research mission from the Kitharan Science Collective. Please, if anyone receives this message, stay away from this sector. The enemy is spreading, and they will devour entire star systems if they are not stopped. We estimate we have perhaps 6 hours before our ship fails completely. This may be our final transmission. May the songs of peace guide you safely through the dark." The message shot out through space, carried by quantum particles that could travel faster than light. It was aimed at the Andromeda Galaxy, where the Galactic Peacekeeping Alliance maintained their headquarters. The alliance was made up of dozens of peaceful species who worked together to solve problems through talking and understanding. Veltar hoped they would receive the warning in time to prepare defenses. But space was vast and unpredictable. Sometimes messages went exactly where they were supposed to go. Sometimes they bounced off gravitational fields or got caught in quantum storms, and sometimes they found their way to places no one expected. This message, carrying the desperate hope of a dying ship, took an unexpected path. It slipped through a fold in space-time and emerged in a completely different galaxy. Instead of reaching the peaceful Andromeda Alliance, it arrived at the outer edge of the Milky Way, where humanity's 3rd colonial fleet patrolled the dark spaces between stars. On the bridge of the Serenity's Echo, Veltar did not know that their message had gone to the wrong place. He was focused on keeping his crew alive for as long as possible. The ship's medical bay was full of injured crew members. The Devourers' first attack had been brutal and efficient. They had fired some kind of corrosive weapon that ate through the ship's living hull like acid through flower petals. Engineer Colwyn stumbled onto the bridge, his normally bright orange skin now a dull gray from blood loss. One of his arms hung useless at his side, and silver biofluid stained his simple robes. "Captain," he gasped, "the heart chamber is failing. The ship's core cannot maintain life support much longer. Maybe 2 hours, 3 at most." Veltar felt his hope shrinking. The heart chamber was what kept their ship alive and breathing. Without it, they would all suffocate in the cold vacuum of space. He looked around at his crew, 23 scientists and researchers who had never hurt anyone in their lives. They studied plants and sang to crystal formations and wrote poetry about the beauty of distant nebulae. They did not deserve to die like this. "What about the escape pods?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Destroyed in the first attack," Colwyn replied sadly. "The Devourers seemed to target them specifically. almost like they knew we might try to run. Outside, the enemy ships were getting closer. Veltar could see smaller craft detaching from the main vessels, boarding ships that looked like metal insects with too many legs. The Devourers did not just destroy their victims from a distance. They liked to come aboard and take everything piece by piece. Limara looked up from her station with tears in her large, gentle eyes. "Captain, I've sent the message 17 times now." No one has responded. "Keep sending it," Veltar said softly. "Even if no one can save us, they need to know about this threat." He moved to the center of the bridge and activated the ship's internal communication system. His voice was broadcast to every remaining crew member, calm and peaceful despite their terrible situation. "My friends," he said, "our time grows short. The enemy will be here soon, and our ship cannot protect us much longer. I want you all to know that it has been an honor to serve with you. You are the finest researchers and the kindest souls I have ever known. Take comfort in the knowledge that our work, our discoveries about the beauty of the universe will live on in the archives we transmitted home. And perhaps our warning will save others from the fate that awaits us." He paused, listening to the sounds of his dying ship. The walls were barely glowing now, and he could hear the life support systems struggling to provide clean air. "Spend these last hours with those you care about," he continued. "Share stories, sing the old songs, remember the good times. We may not have weapons or armor, but we have something the Devourers will never understand. We have love for each other, and for the universe itself. That is not something they can consume or destroy." As he finished speaking, the first Devourer boarding craft attached itself to the ship's hull with a sound like breaking bones. Metal claws began tearing through the weakened crystal walls. Veltar closed his eyes and prepared to meet his end with dignity. He did not know that help was already on the way, traveling faster than light toward their position. He did not know that their message had reached a species that specialized in impossible rescues and hopeless battles. The Devourers were about to learn what happened when predators picked on the wrong prey. In the darkness of space, human warships were coming, and they were very, very angry. The wrong answer Admiral Sarah Chen was having her morning coffee when the universe decided to ruin her day. She stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, looking out at the endless field of stars that marked the edge of human space. The Third Colonial Fleet had been patrolling this sector for 6 months without seeing anything more exciting than a broken asteroid mining station. Chen liked it that way. Boring patrols meant her people stayed alive, and keeping her people alive was the most important part of her job. The Third Fleet was special, not because they had the best ships or the fanciest weapons, but because they were all volunteers from humanity's most dangerous colonies. Every person under her command had grown up on worlds that tried to kill them daily. The coffee was terrible, as always. Fleet coffee was made from synthetic beans and recycled water, but Chen had learned to appreciate its bitter taste. It reminded her of home, a mining world where the rain was acid and the local plants were carnivorous. "Admiral," called out Communications Officer Martinez from his station, "we're receiving a transmission." "It's unusual." Chen set down her coffee cup and walked over to look at Martinez's screen. Numbers and symbols scrolled past in patterns she had never seen before. "Unusual how?" she asked. "It's definitely artificial, ma'am. Structured language, mathematical constants, universal physical principles. But it's not in any database we have. The computer thinks it might be from an alien species." Chen felt her pulse quicken. First contact with alien life was supposed to be handled by the diplomatic corps, not colonial fleet commanders. But they were 3 days away from the nearest starbase, and if this was real, it might be important. Can we translate it? "Working on it now, ma'am. The AI is trying to decode the linguistic patterns. Give me a few minutes." Chen waited, watching the alien symbols flow across the screen. She had been in the fleet for 20 years, and in all that time humanity had never met another intelligent species. They had found plenty of life, bacteria, plants, even some simple animals, but nothing that could build spaceships or send radio signals. If this was really happening, everything was about to change. "Got it," Martinez said suddenly. "At least I think I do. The translation software has figured out the basic grammar. Admiral, you need to hear this." The bridge fell silent as Martinez played the translated message. The voice that came through the speakers was soft and musical, with a strange accent that made some words sound like singing. "This is Captain Veltar of the research vessel Serenity's Echo. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our ship is severely damaged and we cannot escape." Chen felt her blood run cold. "A distress call. Someone out there was in trouble and they were asking for help. The message continued. As Chen listened, she began to understand just how bad the situation was. The aliens, the Kitharans they called themselves, were peaceful researchers who had been attacked by something called the Devourers. They had no weapons, no defenses, and no way to fight back. But it was the description of their attackers that made Chen's hands clench into fists. They consume everything they touch, the alien captain said. They will devour entire star systems if they are not stopped. Chen had heard stories like this before, though never from aliens. Parasitic species that spread from world to world, consuming everything in their path. Humanity had encountered a few such creatures in their expansion across the galaxy. The void wasps of Kepler 442, the metal eaters of the Tau Ceti system. Each time the solution had been the same: complete extermination before they could spread. Where is this signal coming from? Chen asked. Navigation Officer Park ran the calculations quickly. Approximately 3 hours away at maximum burn, Admiral. But ma'am, it's outside our patrol zone. Technically, we don't have authority to operate in that sector. Chen stared at the tactical display showing the alien ship's position. 3 hours away. The message had said they had maybe 6 hours before their ship failed completely. It would be close, very close. She thought about the regulations. The Third Fleet was supposed to patrol human space, not go charging off to rescue aliens they had never heard of. Command would not be happy if she abandoned her assigned route to chase after a distress call that might be a trap. But Chen had not survived 20 years in the colonial fleet by always following regulations. She had survived by making hard choices and living with the consequences. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication channel. This is Admiral Chen. We have received a distress call from an unknown species under attack by hostile forces. The attackers appear to be some kind of parasitic swarm that consumes everything in its path. This represents a potential threat to human colonies and possibly to Earth itself. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew. They were all watching her with the calm expressions of people who had faced impossible odds before, and somehow lived to tell about it. We are going to respond to this distress call, Chen continued. Not because regulations say we should, but because it's the right thing to do. And because if these devourers are really as dangerous as they sound, we need to stop them before they get anywhere near human space. Captain Williams of the destroyer Tenacious was the first to respond. Understood, Admiral. My crew is ready. One by one, the other ship captains checked in, the heavy cruiser Defiant, the assault carrier Relentless, 2 destroyer squadrons and a support vessel full of Marines who specialized in boarding actions on hostile worlds. Martinez, Chen said. Send a reply to the alien ship. Tell them help is coming. What should I say, ma'am? Chen thought for a moment. How do you introduce humanity to an alien species? What do you say to peaceful researchers who had never known war? Keep it simple, she decided. Tell them this is Admiral Chen of the Terran Colonial Fleet. We received their distress call and we are coming to help. Tell them to hold on for 3 more hours. As Martinez sent the message, Chen turned to her tactical officer. Commander Hayes, what do we know about this sector? Hayes consulted his star charts. It's mostly empty space, Admiral. No known planets or stations. But there are some unusual energy readings in that area. Probably why the aliens were doing research there. Any idea what we might be flying into? Based on the aliens' description, we're looking at multiple hostile vessels of unknown capabilities attacking a damaged research ship. The hostiles appear to use some kind of corrosive weaponry and boarding tactics. Chen nodded grimly. It sounded like every nightmare scenario rolled into one. Unknown enemies with unknown weapons fighting an unknown battle for unknown stakes. Under normal circumstances, she would wait for reinforcements and detailed intelligence before engaging. But these were not normal circumstances. Somewhere out there, peaceful researchers were dying while monsters consumed their ship piece by piece. And if the Devourers really were as dangerous as they sounded, waiting for backup might mean letting them escape to threaten other innocent people. All ships, prepare for immediate jump to hyperspace, Chen ordered. Maximum burn. We're going to show these Devourers what happens when they pick on someone who can't fight back. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Chen felt the familiar mix of fear and determination that came before every battle. She had no idea what they would find when they arrived. She did not know if the aliens could be trusted, or if the Devourers were really as dangerous as they seemed. But she knew one thing for certain. If peaceful researchers had asked for help, then help they would get. That was what the colonial fleet was for, protecting those who could not protect themselves, no matter what the cost. The Indomitable and her escorts raced through hyperspace toward an unknown enemy, carrying with them humanity's first gift to an alien species, the promise that no cry for help would go unanswered. Behind them, the edge of human space grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the unknown, and whatever was waiting there had no idea what was coming. First contact protocol violation. The Third Colonial Fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a pack of angry wolves smelling blood. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display update as her ships emerged into normal space. What she saw made her jaw clench with fury. The alien research vessel Serenity's Echo hung in space like a broken crystal sculpture, its hull torn and bleeding silver fluid. Swarming around it were a dozen ships that looked like nightmares made real, twisted combinations of bone and metal that pulsed with their own terrible life. Contact, reported Tactical Officer Hayes. Multiple hostiles surrounding the alien vessel. They appear to be in the process of boarding. Chen could see smaller craft attached to the crystal ship like parasites feeding on a host. Through the Indomitable's powerful sensors, she watched armored figures moving through the alien ship's corridors, tearing apart everything they found. Admiral, Communications Officer Martinez said urgently, "I'm detecting life signs on the alien ship." Faint but still there, Chen felt something cold and angry settle in her chest. She had seen plenty of terrible things in her 20 years with the colonial fleet. She had fought pirates who sold children as slaves. She had hunted down raiders who destroyed entire colonies just for fun. But this was different. This was a peaceful research ship being torn apart by monsters, and the people inside were still alive. "All ships," she announced over the fleet channel. "This is Admiral Chen. What we're seeing here is an unprovoked attack on non-combatants. The enemy appears to be some kind of parasitic swarm that feeds on everything it can find. Our mission is simple: save the aliens and eliminate the threat." She paused, watching as one of the Devourer ships began to pull away from the research vessel, its hull visibly swollen with consumed materials. "Also," Chen added, her voice deadly calm, "it looks like these things have been eating our new friends. I take that personally. All ships are authorized to engage with extreme prejudice." Captain Williams of the destroyer Tenacious was the first to respond. "Admiral, request permission to begin the party." "Granted. Show them how we say hello in human space." What happened next would be talked about in both galaxies for centuries to come. The Indomitable, all 800 meters and 2 million tons of her, accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer vessel. The alien ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the human dreadnought, its surface covered in what looked like breathing holes and weapon ports. It was the kind of ship designed to inspire terror in its victims. It had never met a species that used terror as a weapon. Chen stood calmly on her bridge as the distance closed. "Ramming speed," she ordered. Her crew, all veterans of the most dangerous worlds humanity had to offer, barely blinked. They had done this before. Not exactly this, but close enough. When you grew up on worlds where the weather tried to kill you, and the local wildlife considered humans a delicacy, charging headfirst into impossible odds was just another Tuesday. The Devourer ship finally noticed the approaching threat and began to turn its weapons toward the human fleet. But it was too late. The Indomitable struck the alien vessel amidships with the force of a small asteroid. The sound of the impact echoed through both ships, metal screaming against bone, crystal shattering against armor. The Devourer vessel, for all its size and terrible strength, had never been built to withstand a direct ramming attack from a ship designed by a species that considered head-on collisions a valid tactical option. The alien ship split open like a rotten fruit, spilling its crew into the vacuum of space. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Colonial Fleet," Chen announced on all frequencies as her ship pulled away from the wreckage. "Any ship attacking the beings who sent that distress call has 30 seconds to withdraw before we demonstrate why our galaxy calls us the scary neighbors." The response was immediate and predictable. The Devourers had never encountered resistance before. Their victims usually cowered and begged for mercy while being consumed. The idea that someone might fight back, and fight back effectively, was completely foreign to them. They opened fire. What followed was less of a space battle, and more of an educational demonstration in the difference between predators and apex predators. The Devourers had evolved to hunt weak prey. Humanity had evolved on a world that spent 4 billion years trying to perfect new and creative ways to kill them. The Destroyer Defiant performed a maneuver that military tacticians would later name the Chen Spiral, using its own missile detonations as cover while spiraling in toward an enemy ship, then launching boarding pods directly into the target's hull. Captain Rodriguez had learned the technique fighting pirates in the asteroid fields of the Vega system, where cover was scarce and enemies were everywhere. The assault carrier Relentless deployed its fighter squadrons in a pattern that looked random, but was actually a carefully orchestrated dance of death. The pilots, all of them from the storm-racked world of New Hokkaido, flew their ships through the Devourer formations like they were navigating a particularly nasty hurricane. And throughout it all, the marine transports moved steadily toward their real objective, the damaged alien research vessel. Captain Veltar of the Serenity's Echo pressed himself against the wall of his ship's medical bay as something large and loud crashed through the hull nearby. He had given up hope of rescue hours ago. The Devourers had been systematically tearing his ship apart, taking crew members one by one to feed their hunger. But these new sounds were different. They were the sounds of combat, real combat, with explosions and weapons fire and the screams of dying attackers rather than dying victims. The medical bay door suddenly burst open, and Veltar found himself face to face with something he had never seen before. The creature was about his height but built completely differently. Only 2 arms, 2 legs, and a single head covered by some kind of armored helmet. It carried weapons that looked both primitive and terrifyingly effective. "Don't shoot," Veltar cried, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of surrender. The armored figure paused, then reached up and removed its helmet. Underneath was a face unlike anything in Veltar's experience, flat and angular, with small eyes and a mouth full of what looked like tearing teeth. The skin was a strange pinkish color and the hair was dark and short. "Relax," the creature said in accented but understandable Catharan. "We're here to help. I'm Lieutenant Torres, Terran Colonial Marines. Are you injured?" Veltar stared in shock. This terrifying-looking being was asking about his health. Yes, I think so. They took some of my crew. We'll get them back," Torres said calmly as she began setting up some kind of portable barrier across the doorway. "Marines don't leave people behind. That includes new people we just met." More armored figures poured into the medical bay, taking defensive positions and setting up equipment that Veltar did not recognize. They moved with the precise efficiency of people who had done this many times before. "How many of you are left?" Torres asked as she began examining Veltar's injuries with a device that hummed softly. 23 when the attack began," Veltar replied. "But they took 7 of us. I don't know if—" "We'll find them," Torres interrupted. "Dead or alive, we'll bring them home. That's a promise." She activated a communication device built into her armor. "Control, this is Torres. I've got survivors in Medical Bay 7. Request immediate medevac and combat engineering support. The ship's structure is compromised, but it's still holding together." A voice crackled back through her helmet. "Copy that, Torres. Admiral Chen sends her compliments to the alien captain and says welcome to the neighborhood." Veltar felt something he had not experienced in hours: hope. These strange, violent creatures had come across the galaxy to save people they had never met. They had charged into battle against impossible odds and somehow won. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why did you come?" "We are strangers to you." Torres looked up from her medical scanner, and Veltar saw something surprising in her small, fierce eyes: kindness. Despite her terrible appearance and deadly weapons, she was looking at him with genuine concern. "Because you asked for help," she said simply. "Where we come from, that's all the reason we need." Outside, the sounds of battle were dying down as the last Devourer ships fled or were destroyed. Inside the medical bay, members of 2 completely different species worked together to save lives and tend wounds. First, contact between humanity and the Kytherans had been accomplished not through careful diplomacy or formal protocols, but through the simple act of one species answering another's cry for help. It was exactly the way both species would have wanted it. The Deathworld Standard. The first Devourer reinforcement fleet arrived expecting to find a freshly consumed star system ready for harvesting. Instead, They found Admiral Chen's task force positioned in a defensive formation around the damaged Kitharan research vessel, with human marine shuttles moving back and forth between ships like busy worker ants. Captain Veltar watched from the bridge of the Serenity's Echo as the enemy ships dropped out of their twisted version of hyperspace. There were dozens of them this time, massive bioships that pulsed with hungry life, surrounded by smaller vessels that looked like flying teeth. "Admiral Chen," he said into the communication device the humans had given him. "There are too many of them. You should run." "Save yourselves," Chen's voice came back steady and calm. "Captain Veltar, with respect, you don't understand how this works. We don't abandon people who need help. Besides, I've seen bigger swarms than this on a Tuesday morning." Veltar looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. The humans were outnumbered at least 4-1, and the Devourer ships were each larger than anything in the human fleet. By any reasonable calculation, this was a hopeless battle. But as Veltar was learning, humans had a very different definition of reasonable than most species. "All ships," Chen announced over the fleet channel. "We have more uninvited guests. Standard Deathworld protocol is now in effect. Remember, these things eat everything they kill, so let's make sure they don't get the chance to eat anything." Lieutenant Torres, who was still working to stabilize injured Kitharans in the medical bay, looked up at Veltar with what he was beginning to recognize as a human smile, a baring of teeth that somehow meant friendship rather than threat. "Deathworld protocol," she explained. "It means we fight like we're back home, where everything is trying to kill us and losing means your whole family dies. Should be fun to watch." The human fleet began moving in patterns that made no sense to Veltar's understanding of space combat. Instead of forming a battle line or defensive formation, they scattered in all directions like leaves blown by wind. The destroyer Tenacious accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship, while the cruiser Defiant began spinning on its axis for reasons that escaped Veltar entirely. "What are they doing?" he asked Torres. "Making it up as they go along," she replied cheerfully. "Humans are really good at improvising. It comes from growing up on worlds where the weather changes every 5 minutes and all the local wildlife is venomous." The first exchange, a fire began when the lead Devourer ship launched what looked like a cloud of living missiles, creatures that moved through space under their own power, seeking out enemy ships to burrow into and devour from the inside. The human response was immediate and typically human. Instead of trying to shoot down the bio-missiles, Captain Williams of the Tenacious flew his destroyer directly through the swarm, using his ship's point defense systems to create a corridor of explosions. The few creatures that survived the trip found themselves trying to burrow through armor designed to withstand the acidic atmosphere of Venus. "Biological weapons detected," Williams reported calmly, "deploying countermeasures." The countermeasures turned out to be a cloud of nanobots that the humans had originally designed for medical purposes. The tiny machines were programmed to repair damaged tissue and fight off infections. Against the Devourer bioweapons, they proved remarkably effective at dissolving attacking organisms from the inside out. Veltar watched in amazement as the human nanobots turned the living missiles into harmless debris within seconds. The Devourers had never encountered prey that could fight back with their own biology, but the enemy was learning and adapting. The larger Devourer ships began launching different attacks, beams of energy that seemed to drain the life force from whatever they touched, and clouds of spores that could survive in vacuum and convert any matter they touched into more Devourer biomass. The human response was swift and educational. The assault carrier Relentless launched its fighter squadrons in a maneuver that Captain Torres later described as combat interpretive dance. The small ships moved through the enemy formation in patterns that looked random but were actually based on atmospheric flight techniques developed on worlds with impossible weather. The pilots had learned to fly through hurricane-force winds, tornado swarms, and electrical storms that could fry unshielded electronics. Flying through a fleet of bioships was actually easier than flying through a typical Tuesday storm on New Hokkaido. The fighters didn't just attack the Devourer ships, they led them into traps. By appearing to flee in panic, they drew the enemy vessels into positions where the larger human ships could bring their main weapons to bear. It was a technique borrowed from hunting pack animals on worlds where humans were not at the top of the food chain. Meanwhile, The cruiser Defiant was demonstrating why human engineers were considered either brilliant or insane by most other species. Captain Rodriguez had ordered her ship to begin spinning on its axis while firing its main guns, creating a spiral pattern of destruction that carved through the Devourer formation like a drill. Physics doesn't work that way, one of the Kitharan engineers protested as he watched the impossible maneuver. It does if you grew up in a gravity well that changes direction every few hours, Torres replied. Rodriguez is from Kepler 442c. The whole planet wobbles like a broken gyroscope. Learning to fight while spinning is basically elementary school there. But it was the Indomitable itself that provided the most educational moment of the battle. When the largest Devourer ship, a bio-dreadnought easily twice the size of any human vessel, attempted to ram the human flagship, Admiral Chen did something that would be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 years. She rammed it back. Not head-on, which would have been suicide even for humans. Instead, she used the Indomitable's superior speed and maneuverability to come in at an angle, striking the bioship's weakest point, while simultaneously launching every missile her ship carried directly into the impact zone. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Status report, Chen requested calmly as her ship pulled away from the expanding cloud of debris. Minor hull breach on Deck 7, came the reply. Engineering reports the impact knocked our coffee machine offline. Crew morale is suffering. Priority repair, Chen ordered. Can't fight properly without coffee. Veltar realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans were not just fighting the Devourers, they were beating them. More than that, they were making it look easy. The remaining Devourer ships began to retreat, their hive mind having reached the conclusion that this particular prey was far more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. As they fled, Captain Williams of the Tenacious sent them a parting gift, a spread of torpedoes programmed with a special message. The message was simple and direct. This sector is under the protection of the Terran colonial fleet. Any further attacks on peaceful vessels will be met with extreme prejudice. Have a nice day. As the enemy ships vanished into hyperspace, Veltar found himself looking at the human fleet with new eyes. These strange, violent creatures had just fought off an invasion force that should have been impossible to defeat. They had done it while protecting a damaged alien ship and rescuing people they had never met before. Why are you so good at this? He asked Torres. She thought about it for a moment, then smiled that strange human smile. We had good teachers, she said. Every day growing up, we learned new ways to survive impossible situations. Turns out those lessons work pretty well in space combat, too. Through the viewport, Veltar could see human repair teams working alongside Kitharan engineers to fix the damage to his ship. 2 completely different species, working together as if they had known each other for years. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And it was all possible because somewhere in the dark between stars, someone had heard a cry for help and decided to answer it. The Devourers had learned a valuable lesson today. In a galaxy full of predators and prey, they had just discovered there was a third category. Protectors. And protectors, as it turned out, were far more dangerous than either predators or prey had ever imagined. The new neighbors. 3 weeks after the battle, Captain Veltar stood in what had once been an empty section of space between 2 galaxies. Now it bustled with activity that would have seemed impossible just a month ago. Human construction ships worked alongside Kitharan bioengineers, building something that had never existed before, an intergalactic embassy. The structure was a marvel of cooperation between 2 completely different approaches to technology. The Kitharans had grown the main structure from living crystal that sang softly as it expanded, creating walls that were both beautiful and functional. The humans had added what Admiral Chen called aggressive architecture, reinforced sections designed to survive everything from asteroid impacts to direct weapons fire. Just in case, Lieutenant Torres had explained when Veltar asked why a diplomatic station needed armor plating. You never know what might wander by. Veltar was beginning to understand that just in case was a very important phrase in human thinking. They planned for disasters that might never happen, prepared for enemies they had never met, and built everything to survive situations that rational beings would consider impossible. It was, he realized, what had allowed them to rescue his people when no one else could. Captain Veltar, called a familiar voice. He turned to see Admiral Chen approaching, accompanied by a group of humans in different uniforms than the military personnel he had grown used to. "I'd like you to meet our diplomatic team. They've been very eager to talk with you." The lead diplomat was a woman named Ambassador Walsh, who had the same kind and fierce eyes that Veltar had learned to associate with humans. She smiled as she approached, that strange human gesture that somehow meant friendship despite showing so many sharp teeth. "Captain Veltar," she said in carefully pronounced Kithaeron. "It's an honor to meet you. Admiral Chen has told us so much about your people." "The honor is mine," Veltar replied. "Though I must admit I never expected to become an ambassador. I was only a research captain." "The best diplomats are often people who never intended to be diplomats," Walsh said. "You've already done more to establish peaceful relations between our species than most professional negotiators manage in their entire careers." It was true, in a way. The simple act of sending a distress call had started something that was growing larger every day. Word of the rescue had spread through both galaxies, carried by the Kithaeron communication network and human news services. Other peaceful species in Andromeda had begun sending their own messages, not distress calls, but requests to meet these Deathworlders who had answered a stranger's cry for help. Meanwhile, humanity had discovered that there was an entire galaxy full of species like the Kithaerons. Peaceful, intelligent beings who had never known war but were fascinated by those who fought to protect others. The cultural exchange possibilities were endless. "Speaking of which," Admiral Chen said, "we've received 17 more requests for contact from species in your galaxy. Apparently word travels fast in peaceful civilizations." Veltar's skin shifted to a pleased blue color. "They want to meet you. All of them. The Kithaerons have been sharing recordings of our rescue and, well, you've become something of a legend." Lieutenant Torres, who was nearby supervising the installation of what she called emergency chocolate supplies, looked up with interest. "A legend, really? The stories call you the warriors who fight for others," Veltar explained. "Some species are composing songs about the battle. The melodic collective of Tau Centauri has already created a symphony in your honor." Chen looked uncomfortable with the praise. "We just did what anyone would do." "No," Veltar said softly. "You did what no one else could do, and you did it for strangers." He gestured toward the growing embassy around them. "This is the result. For the first time in galactic history, we have two galaxies working together, peaceful species sharing knowledge with protectors who can keep them safe." It was an amazing transformation. In just 3 weeks, the embassy had become a hub of activity. Kithaeron scientists worked with human engineers on projects that neither species could have imagined alone. Human Marines trained with peaceful species who wanted to learn basic self-defense. Diplomats from dozens of worlds met to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. And through it all, the threat of the Devourers hung like a shadow in the background. The parasitic swarm had retreated after their defeat, but everyone knew they would return eventually. They were too hungry, too driven by their need to consume to give up permanently. "Any word from our scout teams?" Chen asked Torres. "Patrol Group 7 reported contact with a Devourer probe ship 2 days ago," Torres replied. "They destroyed it, but not before it transmitted data back to the main swarm. The enemy knows we're here and they know we're organizing." Chen nodded grimly. "How long before they come back in force?" "Intelligence estimates 6 months, maybe less. They're probably gathering ships from across several galaxies for the next attack." Veltar felt a familiar chill of fear, but it was different now. 3 weeks ago, the thought of facing the Devourers again would have filled him with despair. Now, surrounded by human warships and knowing that dozens of species were working together to prepare defenses, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt ready for a fight. "We'll be ready for them," Admiral Chen said with quiet confidence. "The Third Fleet is just the beginning. Command is sending reinforcements. The 5th Assault Fleet, the 2nd Colonial Defense Group, and a full Marine Expeditionary Force, plus whatever ships our new allies can contribute." "The Kithaerons have no warships," Veltar pointed out. "We've never needed them." "You have something better," Torres said. "You have the best defensive technology in 2 galaxies. Those bioshields your people grow could protect entire planets if we scale them up properly." It was true. The Kithaerons had developed amazing defensive systems, not for war but for protection against natural disasters and dangerous environments. Combined with human weapons and tactics, they could create defensive networks that would make planets nearly impossible to attack. And the harmonious collective has those gravity manipulators, Chen added. The crystalline builders can create structures that are literally unbreakable. The musical species can use sound waves to disrupt enemy communications across entire star systems. She smiled, and Veltar was beginning to recognize the expression humans wore when they were looking forward to a good fight. By the time the Devourers come back, they're going to find a very different situation than the one they left. Ambassador Walsh nodded enthusiastically. We're not just building an alliance, we're creating something new. A confederation of species dedicated to protecting peaceful civilizations throughout both galaxies. What will you call it? Veltar asked. The humans and Kitharans looked at each other for a moment. Finally, Admiral Chen spoke. The Protectorate, she said. Simple, direct, and it explains exactly what we're here for. As they talked, the embassy continued to grow around them. More ships arrived daily, human vessels bristling with weapons, Kytheran bioships that looked like floating gardens, and stranger craft from species that Veltar was only beginning to learn about. All of them working together toward a common goal. Torres activated her communication device and spoke to someone on the human fleet. After a brief conversation, she turned back to the group with news. Admiral, we just received a priority message from the Andromedal Council. They're formally requesting membership in the Protectorate, full membership, including mutual defense agreements and technology sharing. Chen raised an eyebrow. The entire Andromedan galaxy wants to join? Apparently our reputation has spread, Veltar said with what humans would call pride. Peaceful species throughout the galaxy have heard about the battle and the rescue. They want the protection that alliance with humanity would provide. And in return? Chen asked. Scientific knowledge, cultural exchange, and resources from thousands of worlds, Walsh said, consulting her diplomatic pad, plus early warning networks that span half of known space. Chen looked out at the growing fleet and the bustling embassy. When she had ordered her ships to respond to an alien distress call 3 weeks ago, she had expected to fight a single battle and maybe save a few lives. Instead, she had accidentally started the largest interstellar alliance in galactic history. Well, she said finally, I guess we're going to need a bigger fleet. Veltar laughed, a sound he had learned from the humans, who seemed to find humor in the most impossible situations. Around them, beings from 2 galaxies worked together to build something that had never existed before. A civilization dedicated not to conquest or expansion, but to protection and cooperation. In the distance, human patrol ships moved between the stars, keeping watch for threats. Closer to the embassy, Kytheran research vessels worked alongside human science ships, sharing discoveries that would benefit both species. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, the Devourers gathered their strength for another attack, unaware that their next targets had become something far more dangerous than isolated prey. They had become a family. And families, as the Devourers would soon learn, were the most dangerous thing in the universe when someone threatened one of their own.